specifically saying, okay, if you want to nationalize it, then say also sorry for those that had to pass through the liberalization, and acknowledge that that was also a paradigm that came from the Western positions.
Hello, you're listening to episode 4 of the Cost of Living podcast. Today you're going to be hearing from speakers that are based in Central and Eastern Europe. They're going to be pointing a finger where it hurts on the gaps in our analysis and our organizing. As always, you'll be listening to recordings from a live call that we organize with the Gastivists and CEO. My podcast editing skills have improved considerably over the last week, so you'll be listening to 4 speakers today. And this really felt like the bare minimum to be talking about such a complex region. First, you'll be listening to Nawojka. Nawojka is based in Poland. She works with the Gastivist Collective. She's going to talk about how CE is often squished in between 2 big powers. Then you'll be listening from Ani and Eniko, who are both based in Romania. Annie works with the Gastivist Collective and Eniko with Social Housing Now. They're going to be talking about this demand that we're hearing more and more in Western Europe of renationalizing our energy systems. And they'll be explaining how this lands in Central and Eastern Europe. And finally, you'll be hearing from Annie again, but mainly from Josef. He works with Reset, an organization in Czech Republic. And they'll be talking about the specificities and the history of organizing in Central and Eastern Europe. I hope you enjoy this podcast.
We are kind of feeling in between like 2, you could say, imperialist or just bigger than us powers, one of which will be obviously Russia and the other is EU, or you can also call it West if you want. But basically it's just this feeling that we are really small, and historically we've been really torn to these both sides, and that's why we kind of can't really have something on our own, but rather we need to be friends with one of the bigger powers so that the other one is not a threat to us. And so at this moment, we are leaning a lot towards EU, because while conservatives in the region obviously have a lot of like struggles with Western progressive politics, still I would say that the historical trauma towards Russia is way stronger. And that is why there's something that I call the Russian agent trope. And it's that that's why it's really hard for us to, for example, criticize anything that's happening on the EU level, because if we are portrayed as being against the EU, that automatically puts us into being pro-Russian. And at the moment, that is being seen as something totally against our best interest, because as you can see with Ukraine, it's really dangerous to kind of like play with Russia. And so that's why we are really struggling as activists to say anything, because in our perspective, we want to participate. We want to be in the EU because we don't want to be with Russia, but at the same time, we actually have struggles with what the EU is doing, for example, in terms of gas that we are, I think, here all fighting against. And so a good case, I think, that will show this in practice is the Baltic Pipe. I don't know if you've heard of this pipeline, but it's basically from Norway gas extraction through Denmark to Poland. And it just started operating this month. But since I started my work with Gastivists, it was already in build. So that's why also I already knew that I wouldn't be trying to stop this project. But the major argument for climate and in general, like environmental activists to actually not do a huge campaign against this project was exactly the aspect of Russian independence, because this project was really portrayed as something that will make us independent. Because I'm not sure if you know, but here in like more south, it's actually like center of Poland. There's like a Yamal pipeline, which is going from Russia through Belarus, Poland, and to Germany. And this contract was, even if not for the war, it was supposed to end. And then Russia was building Nord Stream 2 with already having Nord Stream 1. So these countries in the region really felt like Russia is trying to kind of just exclude us from the gas business with Western Europe, so that we're not, if the gas is not flowing through our countries, it's kind of easier to invade us. So that's why, like, for example, every Polish person was against Nord Stream, both 1 and 2. And then the Baltic pipe was something like very different that was supposed to help us actually still have the gas when Russia is kind of playing weirdly around us. And that's why this was impossible to be against Baltic pipe for climate reasons, for totally valid reasons, because in the public, it was really not a climate or environmental issue, but rather a geopolitical issue. And that's why you would automatically be portrayed as a traitor of Poland or anything like that, as being pro-Russian, because you don't want Poland to be independent from Russia, so you have to be pro.
But I really want, when we hear demands in the Western countries of nationalizing, working with unions and so on, I want to feel also the solidarity with what the effects of being part of EU for the CE countries meant. We really had to liberalize our market for that, for being integrated fully to the European Union. And if we would have not do that, we would have been left in the dark for the Russian to be taken from. Like, we are really into between these two powers, and it's really hard for us to just say something on a local basis. So I would like to hear more solidarity and articulated in how these countries in between, like the transition countries, for example, when it comes to gas, if you don't exploit in the CEE, because not all the countries are having an exploitative region, but how do they transition and so on, and how that affects the countries. I want to hear this more articulated into the Western narratives, specifically saying, okay, if you want to nationalize it, then say also sorry for those that had to pass through the liberalization, and acknowledge that that was also a paradigm that came from the Western positions.
Ani said about nationalization as a solution, just these few words about the energy crisis. What we see, yes, indeed, Ani already said the liberalization of prices on the energy market just ended. So it was a long process, politically debated. The international financial organizations and the European Commission was putting a pressure on Romania to liberalize its prices in what regards energy. Nevertheless, so now this happened fully. So after the pandemic, in the middle of the war, they did it, so to speak, successfully now. But still, what we can observe that we have some energy companies, both electricity and gas providers, where the state has shared. So the state is still a shareholder. So, this shows us that nationalization or state control on the energy companies in itself, it's still not a solution. Not to speak about the environmental impacts. I'm referring now here, in addition to what was already said, the fact that it depends on how the companies are functioning. So if the state-controlled companies are functioning according to the business model, which is running the capitalist economy and capital accumulation and profit and efficiency and so on and so forth. So this market fundamentalism is present in the public and state-controlled companies. Then this problem of increasing cost of living, including the cost of energy, cannot be solved easily by nationalization.
And historically, the shocks we had with each of the changes of the system in Romania specifically, for example, it really costs the capacity of the population to actually make demands, organize, and so on. Like we can totally see how this affects our daily lives, because all these regimes like made a lot of shocks into the society.
Yeah, generally, I would underscore what Anni has said before. I would say the reaction to the cost of living crisis generally, and this is the same in Czech Republic, is running into both political, economic, and cultural specifics of the CEE region, such as low interpersonal trust, little organizing tradition. Also, it's hard to build a coalition with unions when they are always on the defensive and basically still, like, we haven't managed to even stop the slow erosion of unions and their slow the trend of losing membership and the levels of union organization throughout society. It's we are starting to see interesting, I would say, connections and changes in framing. For example, we have much more legitimacy now blaming big corporations and fossil oligarchs for the crisis. It's running into much less anti-communist backlash and so on. But it's like we're not there yet. Like, we can see the slow evolution of the public discourse and of this ecosystem of organizations around housing, labor, and energy towards the kind of confluence of social and ecological demands that we are starting to see in some of the Western European countries, which is really, like, gives me at least some optimism in the current situation. But here it's much harder. And it's also like, if you look at the Czech unions, like, we managed basically to have this first time they have invited speakers from environmental NGOs to the podium of their demonstration. But it's also like the unions are, because of being on the defensive, they are just used to asking for very little. You know, it's like, yeah, we have a cost of living crisis. So it's not like nationalize energy. It's like raise the minimum wage by 2,000 crowns, which frankly is very little. And then you see the far right, you know, demanding, let's have some free electricity for everyone, or let's just make a deal with Putin so that we have enough gas. Obviously, these demands are completely unhinged, but it's sad to see our pole of the political spectrum being like not also feeling the strength or the self-confidence to ask for more yet. So I think we need still some patience and organizing from the ground up to get to where we would need also on the level of discourse and of political demands.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation. On the live call, we also had input from Karolis, who's based in Lithuania, Veni in Bulgaria, and Katarina in Slovakia. On the next episode, we'll be hearing from the housing movement and how they're organizing in the face of the cost of living crisis.